So I started this channel to find other like-minded individuals, people who don't really fall into the narrative that you're given, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. I do often comment on uh, breaking stories, but I pick and choose. I don't like to go with the most trendy stories unless it's kind of relevant. And I did think before I just go into explaining news stories or trying to analyze them or just get people's opinions on it, I should explain what my ideology is, what the like mindedness that I'm looking for actually is. And I figured I would start off by explaining that I think this is all a sham. I think both sides of the aisle are out to get us and to maintain power. And I think that they do that in a very precise manner. That if you look at the traditional family structure, it's dad, mom, kids. And I think politically, that's what their ideology starts from. With the Republicans being the dad, Democrats being the mom, and all of us being the children. Their number one choice or option is Republican. Because that way they can get away with some of the things that are maybe harsh, if you will. And then they can always have the other party come in and fight back on them. Things, I mean, like tax cuts. A majority of Americans don't agree with tax cuts. But then they can turn people into saying, oh, but it's trickle down effect, trickle down. So they get a certain group of people to be on their side for that. But then there's going to be a majority of Americans who are not really buying into the trickle down effect because it hasn't worked. So then they have that other party. And I'm using this as an example. There's many things. So what happens is if you are right wing, you're going to try to preserve the trickle down economy. If you are left wing, you are going to try to preserve um, a more level taxation. And so you fund these campaigns and you give them money. Meanwhile, they already are doing what they want to do. They've already done it and they'll continue to do those same things. I'll start off by talking about war. War is something that universally none of us really like. We don't want to go to war unless we absolutely have to. If there is another Hitler starting or we're being attacked, of course we'll go to war. But for the most part, we're done with it. It's a waste of American lives and it's a waste of money. George Bush is the first example I'll use, as he got us into two major conflicts. He lied us into these two conflicts, I might add, by talking about weapons of mass destruction that weren't there. There might have, he perhaps knew a little bit more about the incident that happened on 9/11 than he lets on. And he also used that to, you know, to get the Patriot Act in. But it was pretty early on. In fact, I think 2004, I believe, the people were already turning against Iraq. And many of them were on the left. And I remember people saying, blood for oil. That was the big chant. And calling George Bush a war criminal. The liberals hated him and said, he's a scumbag. He's doing horrible things. Bring our troops home. This is too much. This is an endless war. When's it over? And it seemed like, okay, so the next guy who comes in is going to have to be a guy who's going to stop the war and going to have to address that situation. And in came the great brown hope, Barack Obama, where instead of stopping the war, he took us from 2 wars to 7 wars. Well, that don't seem right. That same left party, they should be outraged, should be angry. But they weren't. They didn't say anything. They barely noticed that he had this incredibly high civilian casualty rate with his drone strikes. Now, Fox News started talking about it. The right wing started talking about it. They were getting incredibly upset about the money lost in these wars, the lives lost, and it wasn't until about the end of Obama's second term that they had a candidate who campaigned on ending these endless wars, getting us out of these countries that our troops don't need to be in. We're off dying protecting Saudi oil fields. Why? Nobody's in favor of that. And what happened? Mr. Donald Trump won the presidency on one of his main goals being to stop the war. Instead, he just took Barack Obama's place and, in fact, continued drone strikes at a much higher rate, in fact, in some countries, continuing to pump money into the military industrial complex. Well, the right stopped complaining. They didn't really. Who cares? We've got to. We're protecting democracy, protecting freedom. What are you gonna do about it? I don't hear hardly anybody complain about it from the right. But now the left decided, hey, wait, we were angry when Bush did it. Now we're angry again that Trump's doing it, completely omitting. Oh yeah, Obama kind of did it too. In fact, still many on the left consider Obama one of the greatest presidents ever, not acknowledging the stuff that they hate Trump on. We often don't even pay attention to a lot of what Trump does militarily, but he's still doing it, even though he campaigned that he wouldn't. Most of what we talk about is Trump with culture war, and he said something that people got offended over, and they like to do that so that we fight about these tokenisms while we're giving up everything else. One of the other things that I'd like to talk about when I'm talking about the last 3 presidents is the economy. Um, the economy was another thing that I think set us in a different direction. Um, Meaning, we all have economic security is one of the things that we're very worried about. And we believe that a majority of our tax money, at least, should go to helping all of us, or at least not going to the top 1%, the top 5%. We don't think Wall Street and the big banks need our money. Now, whether you want to keep your taxes or you'd rather that money go elsewhere, that's a different story. But the one thing we can all agree on is the elites don't need our money. The establishment has enough damn money. Shouldn't be pumping more money into them. Well, I'll go back to George Bush and what he did. He deregulated the banks, helped create a Ponzi scheme, so to speak, in the housing market, and caused one of the major collapses of our generation. But as where the average American was getting kicked out of their house, the bankers, Wall Street, they were all doing really good. This worked out really, really well for them. It was a gamble in which they gambled with our money, our houses, our lives, our jobs. What did they lose? Nothing. Because our equity is what they gambled with. Meanwhile, they kept everything they had. In fact, they gained a lot out of it. This seemed to be a huge problem, and many on the left were complaining. This is what George Bush is. He's a criminal. He is a horrible person. He only gives to the rich. He's in with the bankers and Wall Street. Remember all of that. What did Barack Obama do? As you can see in this, um, His cabinet was chosen by Citibank, Citigroup. I apologize. Same people. Where was the left outrage there? Wasn't there. Didn't care. He was in with Wall Street. Joe Biden was once lovingly called the senator from MBNA. There has been no president who had such an affinity for big banks and Wall Street like Barack Obama did. Well, none since Bush before him, and honestly, Trump after him. They've all been in with the big banks and Wall Street, in the military industrial complex, these things that we all universally agree we're against. We don't care because we're told to worry about cultural appropriation, transgender communities using a bathroom. Many people on the right have defended Amazon in the last couple of years because AOC and Amazon were in a fight about something. But meanwhile, the reason why you can't start your own small business is because of Amazon, not because of AOC. But they got you angry at AOC and you supported Jeff Bezos. You supported Amazon and all of it. And just a small example of what they do. I actually know how Amazon has directly affected small business because I own a small business. I was the youngest person in my town to own a small business. I have I've done well. I got lucky. So I've talked to banks, and one of the bankers I talked to, he told me, well, small business loans are what we consider high risk. I said, well, why is that? And he's like, well, if you're not selling haircuts, cupcakes, or uh, pet manicures, then we put you in a high risk market because Amazon, Target, and Walmart. But meanwhile, you're ticked off because someone's putting up a racist statue or someone's taking down a racist statue. You don't stop and say, well, why the fuck isn't antitrust laws going after Amazon? Why are they allowed to target small businesses as they do? They're a fucking monopoly. But who cares? I want to worry about why transgender uses the restroom or why a woman can or can't have an abortion at 6 months or whatever. They play this game on us, but they're all doing the same exact same thing over and over and over. They try to get us to look at the shiny object instead of focus on the things that are actually important to us and things that actually matter to our livelihoods. And whether it's Obama, Bush, Trump, Clinton, you can go back many presidents on this. I just didn't want to make this video that long. You can see that every single one of them has been in the same pockets of the same people. And no, I didn't go into what Trump has done financially, but I will briefly right now. CARES Act gave $4.8 trillion to the richest corporations. Wall Street, big banks, the Fed pumped what, 3 trillion at this point now into Wall Street. That's Trump's Fed. The tax cuts. 17% of the tax cut goes to working family. Really, 83% goes to the richest, to the top 1% of Americans. Is that really something you back? Is that a good idea? I know. I've seen interviews where people will say, "Yeah, but I pay less under Trump, and that's what's important." But when further analyzing this person's tax returns, turns out they actually paid less under Bush. But we don't know. It's 2%, 1%. It doesn't affect us on the same level. And regardless of who's in charge, our economy goes on ups and downs. It has natural crashes. It doesn't really matter who's in charge. And in fact, one of the indictments to this has been one of the major indictments has been the analysis of the CARES Act. What actually stimulated the economy? Was it building the tower higher? The $4 trillion that gave away to the big corporations in Wall Street? The $3 trillion that's being pumped into Wall Street? Did that stimulate the economy more? No, it didn't. Actually, building legs, the groundwork of $1,200 checks stimulated the economy far more than any of that. And it came at a much lower cost, by the way. I think it was a 350 billion. But those aren't fun. It's not to the real wealthy. So they don't really focus on things like that. And it's all been this trick that they do to manipulate us, to fight each other, instead of worrying about the things that help us the most. So, just so you have an idea, when I'm talking about news stories or whatever, my bias is that I think Nancy Pelosi is the same scumbag that Mitch McConnell is, that Donald Trump is the same grifter that Clinton is. They're all the same. They all work together. They're all friends together. They all run in these elite groups together. We like to have this fantasy that they're somewhat different. I even naively feel like Bernie Sanders was different. Josh Hawley, these populists who are on the outside. Yet at the end of the day, the CARES Act that I've mentioned multiple times passed 96-0. It was with Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders signing on to it. Yeah, you can call it the Trump Act. You can call ACA Obamacare. You can do all of that, but these senators are just as complacent in it. They're doing the exact same job they're supposed to do, and that's working for the wealthy. That's who pays their bills. That's their boss. We've lost our representation to these people. Why do they care? And if you are a Trump supporter, one thing to think about is he likes to claim that he's very rich, so he funds his campaign. Well, you should do yourself a favor and look at Sheldon Adelson, a Jewish conservative. Look how much money he dumped in the Trump campaign. And ask yourself, do you think Sheldon has a little bit to do with Trump's decision? Of course he does. It's his boss. They're all working for the wealthy. And it's them versus us. And that's just the way it is. That is exactly how, I should say, that is the lens that I see every news story through. And that's what I try to represent when I do this show. Um, that's just my thoughts. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a real difference in the two parties. Maybe they have these lively debates that I just don't see, or that isn't basically WWE, because it all kind of comes off that way to me. It's all scripted. It looks fake. They all seem to have this faux hatred towards each other. But, you know, when they're actually doing interviews or they're debating each other, we have to stay civil. We can't just call the person out for what they are. Trump's been the closest to do that, to be fair to him. But even then, he holds back so often. He'll say outrageous stuff, like Ted Cruz's dad was a serial killer, something like that. But he won't actually talk about the real disgusting things of the Bush family. Yeah, he holds that back because he'll say the over-the-top stuff, the stuff that's pretty much unbelievable, but is kind of funny. But won't actually say the hard-hitting things, the things that we all kind of know. But God, it would be just the best satisfaction to actually hear someone say that. And of course the others do the same thing. Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Yeah, basically having old man gay love up on their debate stage. Sanders was pulling punches. It was horrible. He could have easily destroyed Biden, but he didn't. Because it's civility, right? Or because they're all working towards the same goal. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. I don't know what that is, but this is the ideology that I use on the show. And so I just wanted to explain that to people. Anyway, you guys take care. Have a good evening.